Hey, so let's talk for a moment about friendship. See, I'm actually a bit of an introvert, so friends don't come easy. Once I get to know you, I open up. But it's getting to that place that can be a real challenge for me. And since the place I get to know people the best is where I work, that's always been where my circle of friends has been found. Well, I've been out of work now for 13 months. And while a couple of those friends are great for a weekly Zoom to shoot the shit and grab a drink, the circle has closed in quite a bit during the pandemic. But something amazing's happened in the last few weeks for me. Some old friends who I haven't spoken to in years have reached out to reconnect. One of the amazing things about real friends is that you can go forever without talking, and as soon as you do again, it's like no time has passed at all. So, my relief valve that I'm taking into the new year is this rekindling of friendships. It has warmed my life at a time where the days are darker and colder and helped inspire a little more hope for whatever the hell it is that comes next. I appreciate all of you friends who've listened to Relief Valve and have allowed me to go on about what I think. I hope hearing what others all over the world have been going through, finding the common as well as the unique experiences, has been insightful, and I look forward to doing more of these in a hopefully much improved new year. I may try to throw some stuff into the feed in the next few weeks, some moments from the season that didn't make an episode, but otherwise, look for a season 2 sometime around the beginning of February. From me and my family to you and yours, the merriest of Christmases, happiest of Hanukkahs, Kwanzas, or whatever you and your tribe celebrate, and most of all, cheers to a healthy and prosperous new year. Chris Hause is the Group Vice President of North American Sales Engineering at Oracle. He spent the first 12 years of his career at Hughes Aircraft Company, where he wrote test automation suites for the M1 Abrams main battle tank, and then later at Hughes Space and Communications, where he worked as a systems engineer supporting integration, system test, and launch operations for various missions, including the Earth Observing System for the Goddard Space Flight Center and launch vehicle integration and operations for the Ariane 4 spacecraft, as well as 2 Space Shuttle missions. Chris lives in a small ranch in Northern California with his wife of 35 years. He has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Chris, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Jeff, it's my pleasure. Good to be here, man.
This is very exciting to me. Chris and I have known each other for a very long time. We worked together back in the 90s at Hughes Space and Communications when I came back out to California. And I don't think we've actually spoken like this in like 23 years.
Jeff, suddenly I feel old, man. It can't have been 23
Oh,
years, really?
I left Hughes in 97 and went to work for Disney. And
Yeah.
so it would be somewhere around there, man. But
That's crazy.
we've kept up over the years. We've kept up over the years, right? I remember when you being a much smarter man than I am left Facebook. Um and and we've been keeping
Yeah.
up on Twitter,
Yeah, and
right?
I mean, there are days I'm not sure Twitter is much better, but yeah, Facebook had to go moons ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I started to back off on Facebook and I don't post a lot there. As a matter of fact, what I typically will do is I'll go on Instagram and post a photograph and then push it to Facebook,
Uh-huh.
um, just to share photos. But Facebook, yeah, especially with my parents, my mother insisted on being on Facebook because it's how she could keep in touch with the world. And I kept trying to explain to her that you really don't want to do this.
No. Plus, there's
um,
something, the dynamic changes rather dramatically, I think, when your parents start showing up on Facebook. Like, that creates an odd system, right?
yeah, well, it should. If your parents raised you properly and gave you a sense of shame somewhere along the line, then it should.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
Oh gosh. Well, currently I run a pre-sales engineering team for Oracle in North America. And I like to tell people I've had a couple of experiences in my professional career where I've gotten to work with just incredibly talented, smart, dedicated, focused people. My first big experience, really, what I kind of consider setting the bar experience was at Hughes Aircraft. Jeff, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
when you're in the rocket science business, building satellites of various types, you're working with some crazy smart people, not only at,
Yep.
at Hughes, but also just the support organizations. Did a lot of work with NASA. I was very fortunate to have been involved in a project called the Earth Observing System, which was part of Goddard Space Flight Center's mission to planet Earth. And you're working with some really leading edge technology, leading edge scientists globally around the world, trying to figure out how to solve some very, very difficult problems. And when you're around those kinds of people, it rubs off. It's immensely rewarding in a number of ways. So that was kind of my first setting the bar experience from a professional point of view. And then I have to say, the work I do now, while it's not rocket science, it is some pretty interesting data science, data management, very large database kind of problems that we get to work with and solve, huge analytics problems. And the team I work with now, I would put, obviously different domain, but I would put on equal footing with the folks I got to work with at Hughes. So I've got a couple of hundred folks in the organization throughout North America, and we have the good fortune of working with some of the largest, most notable companies in North America to help solve their data management and database problems. And it's a heck of a lot of fun, Jeff.
That's cool. I've worked with your products for many, many, many years, both hardware, because you guys also bought out Sun Microsystems many years ago.
Yep, which is actually how I joined Oracle.
Oh, so when you left Hughes, you went to Sun first?
Well, when I left Hughes, I went to a little boutique consulting firm that you and I both had some experience with.
I forgot about that. I forgot
Oh,
about that.
Jeff.
You went to work for
Yeah.
Pencom. My goodness. Well, I was gone. I was gone at that point, right? Because
Yeah, I think we passed.
so my exit from Hughes was a little strange, right? I went from being a consultant for this company called Pencom at Hughes to becoming a Hughes employee because Hughes outsourced to EDS, I think it was a large
Yep.
consulting company, and kicked out all the little guys. And after working for like 4 years as a consultant, having a great time there, I stepped into a full time position as a systems engineer and ran headfirst into the military industrial complex and banged my head really hard.
Yeah, that's a thing.
And as an employee, it was just a different kind of world. And so I lasted in the systems engineer role there maybe a year before I went and said, "There's got to be something else out there." And that's when I discovered Disney, and I spent 10 years at Disney. So
There's an element of that industry that is all about making the simple very complex. There
yeah,
were days we did a really good job of that, Jeff. But so yeah, so I left Hughes, went to Pencom, left Pencom, went to Sun Microsystems, and then of course Oracle famously acquired Sun Microsystems, and so I've been in the combined organization now for 21 years. I think that's right.
wow, you've seen a lot change in
I
that
have.
time because the world is a different place.
Oh gosh.
Um, So, at
Yeah.
what point did you relocate from Southern California up to the Bay Area? Was it for Pencom or was it for Sun?
No, it was for Pencom. In fact, that was one of the attractive features. My wife and I had kind of had enough of the Southern California vibe. No offense to anybody who digs that, but it just wasn't
No,
our
it's
thing.
okay.
And so Pencom was kind enough to move us up north, and we've loved it ever since. I mean, at the time the kids were young; they're now both grown and married. And at the risk of you know making me feel really old, I have three grandchildren now. Jeff, thank you very much.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Look at
our
that.
girls grew up riding horses and showing horses competitively and whatnot, and so moving up here allowed us the opportunity to do that. And it's just been fantastic.
Nice. Nice. So, the world was rolling along as it normally does. And then February, March came along and COVID hit. How did life change for you as far as your job situation and then even your situation at home?
Well, kind of interesting. So I spent a lot of time on airplanes prior to COVID-19 making its grand entrance here to the United States. I would fly, 130, 140,000 miles a year just domestically. And that I haven't been on an airplane since March. And there was a period of time where it really kind of threw my equilibrium off. I'm sure you're this way. I think you're this way. You get yourself into a cadence. At work, there's
Yeah.
this flow of activity that you sort of get into, and in general, every other week I could count on bombing up to the airport, getting on a plane. For me, I get into a routine. I'm sort of wedded to one airline. I know which seats I like. I know where the gates are. I know where the
Yeah.
food is at Houston and Denver and all the airports. And then all that blew
Yeah.
up, and suddenly I find myself at home dealing with this thing called Zoom, nonstop, and sort of waiting to try to figure out how the heck, we're going to continue to interact with customers and, continue to run the business, quite honestly, without contact. And the odd thing is, from a professional point of view, it took a little time, Jeff, but the organization sort of got through that knothole pretty quickly. And one
Yeah.
of the things we spend a lot of time on with my team is, resiliency. Be resilient. We work in an industry that changes rather rapidly, and you have to be in a position to adapt to those changes. You kind of have to consciously say, "I'm going to commit to a change," and then see that change through. And as it turns out, I think that professional resiliency sort of translated into some semblance of personal resiliency through COVID, because you have to just make the adaptation and move on. It's that simple. There's really not a choice. But yeah,
Right.
the world
Right.
changed very dramatically. The notion of face-to-face meetings with my team. I had this whole cadence of meetings set up for months, and all that just went out the window. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it all translates that well to Zoom. Having 30 people on my
Yeah.
Zoom, is there a monitor large
Yeah.
enough to to
Yeah.
get everybody on? The
Yeah.
answer is no, and it's just not the same.
I was fascinated to watch how the entertainment business, which I've been attached to for a long time now, the problems that we always face on the production side of, you know, latency in accessing storage and networks so that
Hmm.
people who are working with images could get the data they needed fast enough. And we were always convinced that we could not do that remotely. You had to be as close to your data source as possible in order for it to work. And they
Yeah,
managed to figure it out. It's a combination of the moment in time, right? The networks are good enough, though.
yeah.
If anybody from any telco out there is listening, please fix the last mile because it sucks. Um, I mean, seriously, how if you can make a network that big, I know how hard it is, so I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you can make a network that big, can't you make it work in my house too?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
please. And can I pile on
Yeah.
that point for just a moment? Because we live in a very rural area of Northern California. Could somebody please fix rural internet in the United States of America? I mean, come
Yes.
on, people.
Yeah.
I just don't
Yeah.
believe the problem is that hard to solve. So, clearly somebody's got to put some money into it. Obviously, there's not the population
Yeah.
density, to drive the big bandwidth numbers in rural parts of the country. But for the love of all that's good, if there's one thing that COVID has
Yeah.
shown us, it's that people are leaving big cities. And you've got
Yep.
professional people who, like myself, do a lot of work online. I need good broadband internet. Come on, man. And I don't want to wait for Elon
Yeah.
Musk to get
Yeah.
another 10,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, to give it to me either.
Right. Well, yeah, I'd like to be fair, I'd like to be able to look up at the night sky and see stars and not just satellites because
Right?
that's the only way we can do this, you know.
Right. Exactly.
No, I'm totally with you on that. The fact that, all of these artists now can be anywhere in the country and doing their job because we figured out enough about how to get the technology to work and the pipelines to work correctly that you don't, you can now be a Disney artist who's living in Iowa while you're doing your work.
Yeah.
But that's speaks right into what you just said, right? People are now going to start leaving big cities because they can now work anywhere because business is never going to go back to what it used to be.
No.
I'm expecting that when things open up again down here in Southern California, there's going to be a glut of commercial real estate, and you're going to start seeing things like you saw in New York after 9/11, when skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan over by the stock exchanges all of a sudden were converted into condominiums
Mhm.
because fiber optic networking meant that brokerage houses didn't need to be down the street from the exchange anymore to do business. They could be
Right.
in New Jersey, they could be uptown, and they had this glut of office space. I think you're going to see the same thing here, right? Because businesses will no longer create 10,000 seats for 10,000 employees. They don't need it. They'll have
Right.
5,000 seats, and then you'll book your desk if you need to work in the office that day, right? We were starting to move in that direction. I was working for Fandango, and Fandango was owned by NBC Universal, and a couple of times a year I would go back to New York for meetings, and I would work out of 30 Rock while I was there, and they were already starting to create this. There are no fixed desks here anymore. You come in, you badge
Hmm.
in, you reserve your desk, and then that's your desk
Hmm.
for the day. And I think that's going to be the norm going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
So I assume you are based somewhere in the your office is based somewhere in like the Redwood City area. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, my office of record is in Santa Clara, just south of Redwood
Okay.
Shores. But I rarely go
Okay.
in. I used to joke with people. I spent more time in our offices in Chicago than I do in the corporate offices here in the Bay Area. Uh, so yeah, the notion of an office is kind of and I think this is true for most people who live in the field and talk to customers a lot. Why be in an office? Where I should be is out talking to
Yeah.
customers, and in the market, as it were. Um,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting. I'm with you. I don't think anybody's going to go back to the big real estate footprints from a corporate point of view. A lot of our customers are
Yeah.
moving away from that model. And you think about the savings associated with vacating leased
Yeah.
office for a company like Oracle. We have offices obviously in all the major metros across the country. Some of them we own, some of them we don't own. And to vacate
Yeah.
the leased space, it's a huge savings. Then you add on top of that, I'm not on a plane for a year, and you
Right.
multiply that by 30,000 people in North America. That's a huge savings. So how this all shakes out is going to be interesting, but it's never going to go back to the way it was. I agree with you.
And you probably have great insight on this. What about things like conventions and conferences and that kind of thing? Do you ever think that starts to come back again?
I do. I think that will come back, for the simple reason that there's a lot of advantage for customers. Like you think about Open World, which is our big soiree, which was going to be in
Yeah.
Las Vegas this year for the first time. It was the first time we didn't do it in San Francisco. Um,
Okay.
but the advantage of a show like that is you gain access to Safra Catz, Larry Ellison, all the senior executives of
Right.
Oracle in one place at one time. It's very, the information can be delivered in a very compact way. And I think so. I think there is an advantage for customers to come into that kind of a venue. Will it be as large as it was in the past? Maybe not. But I think those things
Yeah.
will eventually come back in the fullness of time, Jeff.
Okay. That's good because I agree with you. I used to, for me, the conference of the year was typically National Association of Broadcasters, also in Vegas. But it gave me that opportunity to visit all of the hardware vendors that I was doing business with at the same time because they were
Right.
all in one place instead of having to, make multiple trips to San Francisco in order to meet with people or do that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I look forward to that coming back someday. Oh, so you live up in Northern California, generally speaking, in the San Francisco Bay Area. You're not in the city proper. Are you very far out? I don't want to get you too personal about like don't leave your address on the podcast or anything. But
Yeah. Right. Okay. No. So we are
yeah,
about 60 miles southeast of Sacramento, up in the Sierra foothills. Live on a small ranch.
oh,
I
okay,
mentioned earlier the girls grew up riding horses and whatnot. We used to live in the East Bay. I was going broke boarding horses, so we found a piece of property that would accommodate uh, livestock, and so we've been here for 20 years, I guess. and it's been fantastic. And it's
Nice.
kind of interesting. I mean, people say, we do live in the sticks, Jeff. I mean, the kids were 20 miles to high school. I'm
Oh, okay. Yeah.
15 miles from the closest grocery store. The closest Costco is 30 miles away. It's that kind of an environment. But in today's day,
Yeah.
interestingly, it's kind of a feature. Like there's a long list of stuff that I
Yeah.
just don't have to worry about being here in the middle of the boonies. And it's
Yeah.
it's been interesting to watch what's happened to real estate in the area. We're a rural agriculture area. Cows, grapes, and olives are kind of the three things that grow here. And
Yeah.
you see properties go up on the market and they're sold usually within 48 hours, and that's different. Like it wasn't that way,
Yeah.
2 years ago. Properties would sit on the market for some period of time because it's kind of a lifestyle location. But now
Okay.
properties are getting snatched up like crazy. It's a little nutty.
And that's people relocating out of the cities and not people coming in to start up ranches or for
Correct.
agriculture.
Correct.
Okay.
We've got two new neighbors, one of whom, well, both of whom are in technology, that have moved out here, and it's one of them moved from San Francisco and one of them moved from San Jose, and it was just to get out of those compact urban areas. And again, it's a function of they can, so why not?
Yeah, that's true. So in the cities, of course, especially in California, which has got its own unique blend of government in the way it operates statewide, the cities got hit pretty hard at the beginning, and then started to lock things down. Did you see COVID showing up out where you are, and how was the general community reaction? Because that's something that I've spoken to different people about throughout the year that I've been doing this now, and I don't get a strong feel for what it was like in the really rural areas.
Yeah, so great question. Obviously, very different. And this is kind of one of my pet peeves with the general response to COVID. So,
Hmm.
very rural area. I mean, for me to socially distance myself from somebody, I'd have to go find somebody to be socially distant from. My closest neighbor is a quarter
Right.
mile away, for example. So very, very different kind of demographic population density. We have had COVID cases up here. It's not huge. It's not like it's been running rampant. The in general, the community has been very responsive, very respectful. A lot of mask wearing, that kind of thing. Although,
Yeah.
I joke with people that I live in the Texas part of California, and some of your listeners may be interested to know that there actually is such a place. Uh,
Oh yeah.
but
No, there are vast swaths of California that are very conservative.
oh
No
yeah,
question about
and
it.
and I'm kind of in the middle of
Yeah.
that. So like the sheriff here is like, no, I'm not arresting anybody for not wearing their mask. I'm not, this curfew thing. He came out very quickly and said, no, we're not enforcing a curfew. You're all adults. Go on about your business and make the best decision you think you need to make. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Some of the businesses have said, if you're not wearing a mask, you can't come in, and I think that's fine. The business owner gets to make that
Mhm.
decision, just as customers get to make the decision whether or not they patronize that business. I mean, to me, these are adult decisions that adults
Absolutely.
get to make, right? So
Yeah.
I would say clearly much less impacted than the more densely populated areas. But again, everybody's worried about it. We've got a
Yeah.
fairly substantial aged population up here. And obviously, that's a demographic that everybody's worried about. I will share with you, my mother lives in an assisted living facility near us. We haven't,
Yeah.
been able to physically see her since March. She's 93. She has
Yeah.
dementia.
Yeah.
And so it's, that brings its own set of challenges and issues. But they have had COVID in the facility. They've been able to manage it. They've had two outbreaks, kind of at the tail end of one of them now. And that's kind of
Okay.
scary because those are the people that you worry about. My wife's
Yeah.
folks are in their 80s. They live in Southern California, so it's a very different dynamic down there. But in general, up here, Jeff, I would say we're
Yeah.
sort of weathering the storm. The biggest impact here, candidly, has been
Yeah.
kind of the supply chain related issues. We went through the
Yeah.
the vacated paper aisle for an extended period of time up here, and we're sort of in the hinterlands. So when you think about what it means to get supplies, you know, truckloads of groceries up to a place like this, they're going to service the more densely
Yeah.
populated areas first. And so we were kind of at the tail end of that recovery. Hopefully, we won't go there again, but. Yeah, I would say the community here. The other thing about rural communities, I think this is true in general, very tight knit. I mean, when there's a problem,
Yeah.
the community really rallies around to go address the problem. And I mean, there are countless examples that I could cite. We've had some, over the years, we've had a number of local tragedies. Uh, we had a group of kids get into a fatal car accident, killed three high school aged kids. The whole community came together, rallied around the family, financial support, uh, cooking meals, that kind of thing. And this went on for an extended period of time. So these rural communities really come together in times of crisis, and I would
Yeah.
certainly characterize this as a time of crisis. And it's kind of
Yeah.
warming to see the community do what communities like this are known to do, and that is come together and support each other.
That's great. That's very cool. It's the dynamic in the city, of course, is very different. And I have been a city boy my entire life. I grew up in New York. I moved to Los Angeles. The closest I've come to being in a small space was I spent a month in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Right. So, and that's by that part of the world standards, it's New York, right?
That's a
Um,
metropolis, brother.
so
Just to be clear.
yeah, I know. I remember. I remember pulling in my first time coming across country to California, and I drove. I pulled into Oklahoma City, and I envisioned. And you'll understand this. A lot of folks in the audience won't. I envisioned it was going to be downtown El Segundo,
Oh yeah, huh?
right? This like one, this little this little one street with all the different shops along it and
Boutiques. Yeah,
municipalities, and that would be it. And it was like, no, this is a real city. Damn
yeah,
it, you should start paying attention to what's going on around you.
yeah. This is
Um,
Skyline, dude.
yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? It taught me to respect a lot of the rest of the country, right? Because it forces you to take your blinders off and realize that, holy crap, this is a big place and there's a lot of stuff going on, and you should pay more attention to it.
Yeah.
Um,
At the risk of doing a student body left into some choppy water, I think you're touching on something just in the national ethos that is relevant, and that is this just tendency to ignore other points of view and other contexts. We talk a
yes,
lot about diversity in this
yes,
country, and diversity has many, many flavors, right?
yep,
Geographical, life experience, et cetera, as well as some of the more traditionally well understood versions of diversity. And I think it's important for people to recognize that where I live is not where you live. Like I said, I'd have to go find
yeah,
somebody to be socially distant from. You live in a very densely populated area, and there's value in understanding those contexts, I think.
yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the biggest. I'm 1,000% with you, right? I think that the biggest problem we have in this country is we don't get around enough to understand how people live in different circumstances, because this country is so large, each state is almost like its own country. That's
Yeah,
one of the things I certainly experienced when I drove from New York to Los Angeles, and I drove there and back. I've done the cross country drive 3 times
yeah,
over the course of my life, and I've taken different routes each time. And all of these places have their own unique cultures. They have their own unique way of living their lives. And they even have different accents, right? Which we feel as we travel across the country. And we're all tied together by some common beliefs and values, but
yeah.
everybody lives their own thing, man. And we should respect each other for that and find a way to have reasonable dialogue. While we're going through it. We don't have to agree on everything, but we also don't have to hit each other with sticks.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, disagreement doesn't mean wrong. It just means disagreement. And I think there was a time when
Yeah.
this country understood that. But and so I don't know if it's a function of social media or if the country has actually changed. I mean, I sort of look at social media as, Twitter is a confirmation bias engine. All it does is drive people further into their
Yeah.
respective corners. And so I don't know
Yeah.
if looking at kind of society through the lens of Twitter is maybe the wrong way to do it, but there does seem to be this sense of, well, if you disagree with me, you're clearly wrong and you're an idiot, and your name belongs on a list someplace so that we can re-educate you. And that's just like, what?
um, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And for me, as far as social media goes, it's people think they're anonymous when they go on social media, right? And so because they believe they're anonymous, all the filters come off. And they go out and they say things that they would never say to face in public. They would never behave that way. For me, if you go looking for me on social media, use my name because I don't believe in being anonymous, even on Twitter, right? And occasionally I make comments on Twitter. I try to be measured in the way I speak anywhere in public because I present myself as myself, right? I'm not hiding behind an alias or creating some weird avatar. When you find me, you will find me.
Yeah,
And that's the biggest problem. What's scary is people are getting comfortable in these avatars that they create for themselves online, and they're taking them out into the streets. And nobody should behave that way in the streets. That's, you have to have some kind of measured decorum to be in a society the way we
yeah.
live.
I agree, and I think so. I'm the same way on Twitter. If you want to search for me, you'll see my name. And I
Yep.
also try to be very measured. The thing about Twitter, I've met some people, air quote, met some people on Twitter who are just hilarious, and I spend a lot more
Yeah.
time interacting with those people anymore. Like I kind of went through a spring cleaning of my Twitter, follows, and got rid of a whole bunch of the political, you know, obviously one side agenda kinds of people. And boy, my
Yeah.
social media life, if that's a thing, has improved. Um, and I just think, but to the point you were making earlier, you have to make a conscious decision to go do those things. Like you have to put energy into those
Yeah.
things for it to pay off. And I don't know that enough people are
Yep.
doing that. And I agree with you on the social media personas bleeding over into real life. And I think from my point of view, I see it when people drive. Driving to
Yeah.
me has gotten a lot worse, over
Yeah.
the years. And I
Yep.
think it's people just have this, I'm me, I'm here, I'm going to occupy this space, or I'm going to cut you off, or I'm going to ride your bumper, whatever it is. Maybe I'm getting old. I don't know. But people just don't drive well anymore, Jeff.
Yeah. No, there's I believe it was a generational thing. I think it probably started in the 60s, 70s. And we have a round of folks going around nowadays who think that it's their world and the rest of us are just traveling through it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so it's our job to watch out for them because they don't have to watch out for us because it's their world.
Yeah.
I like to smoke cigars and I will sit in my garage and I will smoke cigars. So I'm trying to be a good neighbor. I sit in my garage. I've got the door mostly closed. I've got a filter in here. But even so,
Hmm.
even if I'm sitting inside my house, mostly with the door closed, if a little bit sneaks out the bottom, it's a problem. And I'm at the point where I'm trying to be polite and a good neighbor because I don't really want problems with the people who live next door to me. But there are days when I want to look over and say, you know what? I'm sitting inside my house. It's none of your business what I do. Please go away.
Thank you. Thank
But
you.
but there's that sense of entitlement, and you come across it all the time. Of well, but you're getting into my world. It's like, yeah, but my world and your world are the same world, so we have to find a
Yeah.
way to work together. And I think
Yeah.
that's just been it's a problem.
Yeah, I think that goes back to some of what we were talking about a little earlier. It's this unwillingness, inability anymore to understand nuance, subtlety, the other person's perspective, to have empathy, to recognize that different isn't
Yeah,
wrong. It's just different. And I think that's another
yeah,
example of that, quite honestly.
yeah. No, I agree.
The
I agree.
the other point I was going to make as it relates to just kind of social media and human behavior. You and I grew up in an age I would endeavor when if Jeff Rockland was running wild in the streets of New York and one of your friend's parents happened upon you and your shenanigans, there was
Yep.
tacit approval for said parent to smack you upside the head and get you back in line.
Yeah.
I know that was the case, with
Yep.
my growing up. It didn't have to be your parent; it could be any
Yeah.
arbitrary parent And I think we've lost
Yep.
that. There's this hesitancy to correct kids anymore, and I think that was like a good thing back in the day. You know, not obviously it has its limits,
Yeah.
but I think the notion of correcting bad behavior when it occurs, regardless of how you relate to the kid at the time, is something that we've lost, and I don't know that we're for the better for it.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Also, because your kids would have grown up through this same kind of era, the whole the self esteem movement that came up
Yeah,
in the '70s and the '80s, right? This idea of, oh, we it's better to make people feel good about themselves because it helps make them a stronger person. It doesn't, right?
no,
I mean, I when I raised my kids, when we did things like organized sports, right? I or anything they did, right? When my son, we were out playing t-ball, and they're like, "Oh, we don't keep score. It's all about teamwork and friendship." And my son would sit there and go, "Then why am I playing? I want to win the game." And there's nothing wrong with that. I
yeah,
I was very, very specific to make sure my kids understood, and this is a core tenet in how I work as a manager as well, that it's okay to make mistakes. You're just not allowed to make the same mistake twice,
right,
because the reason you make mistakes is to learn from the mistake you've made and move on from there. And so, go and do your best. Try as hard as you can and recognize the fact that failure, while it happens, is not really an acceptable long term outcome. You
right,
have to pick yourself back up and go out and make something for it. And I think we've created at least a generation that feels like, and I see it with parents with when my kids were growing up, where it's like they'll be angry at the teacher because their child isn't doing well in school, but they'll never look inside to see whether or not there's something they need to fix in the way their child is interacting.
right.
And I've always felt it's, if my child fails a test in class, my child didn't prepare for the test, and we need to fix that. If the entire class fails the test at the same time, then we got a teacher problem that we need to
Yeah,
work out.
yeah,
Um, but most parents don't. Most parents don't think that way. Their child is a precious thing, and must be treated like a Fabergé egg with all the gentility and protection in the world.
yeah.
And I'm like, no. If they fail, tell them they failed. Tell them failure is not an acceptable option, and make them go out and work for it.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality
Gosh,
is, you just I discovered a lot of stuff that I wasn't good at as a kid because I failed
yeah,
consistently. And it's like, okay, so
yeah,
this is not my gift. I'm going to go try something else. But the point is, you continue to try something else until you find the thing that is in your gift, and then off you go. And I agree, this self-esteem thing, like life is a contact sport. When you get outside that bubble of
yep,
protection of your teachers and your parents and whatnot, the world is a very harsh place. And
yep,
if you fail, you fail. And I think, whether it's in the business world, in the political arena, whatever, you have to put forth the effort. Like, you have to prepare for things. You have to put the work in. If you fail, inventory the lessons from that failure and you apply them to your next attempt. But I agree. This whole
yep.
"oh, it's okay, everybody gets a T-shirt" thing, I think is not has not done
Yeah,
well, and it's again, at the risk of
yeah,
getting into some choppy water here, this whole forgive student debt thing to me is kind of in that vein, in the sense that now firstly, I am not a fan of the federal government loaning money to 18-year-olds to go to college. I think it inflates the cost of
yep,
college just generically, because all of a sudden it's not my money, it's somebody else's money, kind of a thing. So I'm not. I'm just in general not a fan of the approach. But look, if you took out the loan, you took out the loan. We can argue about whether the terms of the loan are fair, whether the cost of college is fair, and candidly, I'd be much more interested in having the discussion around why are universities costing kids 50, 60, 70, $100,000 a year to get out of. That to me is a much more interesting discussion to have than oh, I know you took out the loan, but we're going to forgive it. That's not how that works.
I think that community service that can be applied towards student loans is a good thing. I am also I'm also a believer that there is a role for government in helping society along and making things better, even though we need to keep tighter track of government so that they don't keep wasting
Ugh,
resources. Um,
yes.
because the purpose of it being there is so that we can function better together as a society, right? I ride very much in the middle, and I think if I could, I would vote for like Dwight Eisenhower if they would give me that as an option.
Yeah.
Because I realize that back in that era we taxed the living daylights out of very rich people, and then
Hmm.
we did things like create the interstate, right? and and we were able to do things like a space program that could put people on the moon, right? And I know there needs to be a balance in the middle of all of that, but at my core I believe that it's okay for us all to contribute to make our quality of life better across the board. It just we have to find the right balance. And somehow when those peak taxes were 90%, somehow the Rockefellers and the Carnegies didn't go out of business. They
No,
managed to survive it.
yeah, I mean, like I'm kind of a fan of a flat tax. I think the tax code has just gotten so opaque, and when you look at, when you talk about
Yeah,
taxing the rich, even, it's kind of, I guess, but the reality of it is there's so much maneuvering that wealthy people can do around the tax codes that, you say, oh, we're going to tax the rich. It's a great slogan, I guess,
yeah,
but
yeah,
without kind of completely revamping the tax code and stripping it down and making it much more easy to digest, I think, you're uttering words. It's like Green New Deal and cancel student
yeah,
debt. There's great slogans, but
yeah,
think through what that
yeah,
actually means. Make the tax code really rock simple. Strip it down to a flat tax, and off we go. I think that makes a lot more sense than what we're doing today with all these deductions and special treatments and all this stuff.
yeah. No, I absolutely agree. All right. What? How are you feeling about the next 6 months?
Jeff, you know me a long time. I'm kind of an optimist. I'll tell you that I try to spend a lot of time focusing on the good, and in spite of the fact that just generically 2020 has been something of a trash can for the world. We were
Yeah.
blessed with our second and third grandchild. I'll
Uh,
I'll, sh- I'll
yes.
share with you. My wife had her second bout with cancer and kicked it squarely in the nuts. Uh,
Good.
so there's a
Good
lot.
for her.
We have a lot to be thankful for. We have our health. Um, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I am working, and I'm working like a rented mule in the sense that I am as busy as I've ever been.
That's good.
It is, but I recognize that we have not been as impacted by what's going on as a lot of people are, and for that I am deeply grateful, and I think I have an obligation because of it. There are a lot of folks who are less fortunate. I mentioned we live in a very rural area. There are some folks who have been impacted here, and I think we have an obligation to where we can help those folks, and so we try to do that. But I am generally optimistic, Jeff. I think we talked a little bit earlier about resiliency, and I think one has to be resilient in times like this. We have to find ways to
Yep.
adapt. I think we have to put energy into remaining positive and continuing to move forward, because the truth
Yep.
of the matter is COVID is here. It is
Yep.
going to do what it's going to do in my mind, and we have to adapt to that. So I choose to remain very optimistic about the next 6 months, Jeff.
Awesome. That's great. Chris, is there anything I can plug for you?
No, this has been just a joy. I really appreciate
Yes.
the opportunity to just chat. The time has gone by very, very quickly here, Jeff. It's great to reconnect with you. I've appreciated your friendship over the years, and it's great just to have these discussions. I hope somebody out there benefits from it.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really really glad you were able to find some time so we could talk. One last thing I'm going to mention to you before I sign off of this, you gave me an absolutely wonderful letter of recommendation when I left Hughes, and I still have it sitting in the lockbox in my fire. I have like a little fire safe lockbox in the house where we
Yeah.
keep all of our important papers, and I still have that letter sitting in that lockbox all these years
Oh
later.
my. Oh
So
my
it was
goodness
that
sakes.
it meant that much to me. It was really, really beautiful, and that's how I feel about you, Chris. I'm glad we're reconnected, and We will definitely keep having conversations.
Sounds great, Jeff. Thank you so much. I love you, brother. Stay safe. Let me know if there's anything I can ever do for you too.